time was undermining our Constitution and moving us into an autocratic type of society. We are united on that. And as I have said many times, if I do not win the Democratic nomination, and I hope and expect to win it, I will support Joe Biden. And Joe Biden has said that if he does not win the Democratic nomination, he will support me. And that is true, I think, for all of the candidates who have run for the Democratic nomination. We are united in our desire to defeat Donald Trump. The question, I think, that the nation has got to ask ourselves is, which candidate, which campaign is best positioned to defeat Donald Trump? Which candidate has the best record to be able to stand up to the ugly attacks that will be coming from Trump and from his allies? Which campaign will be able to energize the American people? I think those are the honest issues that the American people are now examining. We don't have to, in terms of the coming general election, we don't have to predict what Donald Trump will be saying about Joe Biden, because he is already making those attacks. Yesterday, Donald Trump, who won Michigan, who won Wisconsin, who won Pennsylvania by modest votes, but he won them, made one of his major campaign tenets his opposition to NAFTA and PNTR with China. And in 2016, he criticized those trade policies as being disastrous. And just yesterday, he once again made that claim. And the truth is, and we have to be honest about this, that NAFTA and PNTR, permanent normal trade relations with China, cost this country well over 4 million good-paying jobs. In Michigan alone, these disastrous trade agreements led to the loss of more than 150,000 good-paying jobs. And not only job loss, when good-paying jobs go, you're involved in a race to the bottom, and employers can pay lower wages. So these trade agreements have been a disaster for the people of Michigan, for the Midwest, and in fact, for the state of Vermont, and for the entire country. Well, Joe Biden and I have very strong different positions in terms of how we reacted to NAFTA and to PNTR. And that is why back in 1994, during the NAFTA debate, and in 2000 during the PNTR debate, I not only opposed those agreements, I can remember like it was yesterday. I was on a picket line in Montpelier, Vermont, with workers opposing these disastrous trade agreements. I vigorously opposed these agreements. I helped lead the opposition to these agreements. Joe Biden supported those agreements. And that is a fundamental difference about our approach toward the trade union movement, toward the needs of working people. But it is not just the trade agreement, which is so important to the Midwest. If Democrats are going to regain control of the White House and make sure we win the Senate, make sure we retain control in the House, we're going to have to be very, very clear about our consistency, our support for programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans' needs. As I think all of you know, Donald Trump, in his budget, called for massive cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and cuts to Social Security. Now, Trump lies all of the time, so despite what he is doing in his budget, he is claiming that he supports Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, which of course he does not. But he is already attacking Joe Biden for the fact that Biden has been on the floor of the Senate in years past calling for cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and veterans programs as a part of a Bowles-Simpson approach and balanced budget efforts. And these are issues that Trump will certainly be emphasizing in the campaign. And I'm very proud to say that I have consistently led the effort to protect Social Security, to expand Social Security benefits. When Bowles-Simpson, this effort to cut Social Security and other important programs was gaining steam, I helped put together a caucus in the Senate, which we call the Defending Social Security Caucus. And what we said is, when so many of our seniors are trying to get by on $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year Social Security, we're not going to cut Social Security. We're not going to raise the retirement age. We're not going to fudge around with the cost of living adjustments. And that is my record. But again, it's not only trade and it's not only Social Security. If we are going to win this election, and as I've said many times, anyone who underestimates the strength of Trump and his campaign is making a mistake. He will be a very formidable opponent for a number of reasons. We've got to rally our base, and that means rally the women's community, rally the LGBT community. And on these issues, especially at a time when women are under severe political assault in Congress, in the Supreme Court, in state governments, all over this country, where people are determined to try to take away a woman's right to control her own body. I think people all over this country, women and men, are going to look at the record of which candidate has been consistent and strong in terms of defending a woman's right to choose. On this issue, Joe Biden repeatedly voted for the Hyde Amendment. And the Hyde Amendment is an amendment which would deny lower-income women access to Medicaid funds in order to make their own reproductive decisions. I am very proud to say that I have a lifetime voting record in support of a woman's right to control her own body. And it is no different with our brothers and sisters in the LGBT community. Today, thank God, it is relatively easy to be a champion of gay rights. Virtually every Democratic candidate for president was, and I believe sincerely, a champion of gay rights, including Joe Biden. But that was not the case 25 years ago, when it was not so easy to stand up for the LGBT community. And during that time, I stood with the LGBT community when there was a very difficult vote. I remember it very well, because we got a lot of negative response from Vermont. And that is the so-called DOMA Act, Defense of Marriage Act. And what that act was about was saying, in Congress, led by right-wing Republicans, is that what marriage is about is a marriage between a man and a woman. That's what it is. We reject gay marriage. That was a tough vote. And in the House, I was part of a minority who voted to say, I'm sorry, marriage is marriage, and we're not going to look at gender. People have a right to love each other regardless of their gender. But in the Senate, it was also a tough vote. 14 members of the United States Senate at that time voted against the so-called Defense of Marriage Act. Joe Biden was not one of them. Furthermore, Joe supported banning opening gay Americans from serving in the military, the so-called don't ask, don't tell effort. My view was very different. So as we enter the moment in this campaign where we come down to a two-person race, I think it is important for us to differentiate our records, and I intend to do that. So let me once again say that Joe Biden is a friend of mine. And if Joe wins the nomination, I will be there for him, and I'm confident that if I win the nomination, Joe will be there for me. And that's true. I think I speak for all of the Democratic candidates who contested this nomination. But it is important to take a look and see which candidate can win in states like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, like Ohio, like Wisconsin. And I think for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is our long-term record. Joe's been around for a long time, so have I. And I think people would want to take a look at those records. Yeah.
Senator, do you think Joe Biden, if he is the nominee, could defeat Donald Trump in the general election?
Look, yes, I do. I think we are the stronger campaign to defeat Donald Trump. But you have not heard me say that I think that Biden cannot defeat Trump, but I will certainly do everything I can if he is the nominee.
And just one more on that. You're talking a lot about his record from 20, 30 years ago.
No. We're not. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. If my memory is correct, and you'll check me out on this one, and I think I am right, just in the time span of this campaign, Biden defended his votes on trade agreements. So this is not ancient history. He was asked by somebody within the last year, I believe, his views on whether he thought NAFTA was a good vote or not, and I think he defended that. So that's kind of recent history. But the other point that I make is not to harp on something that happened 20 or 30 years ago, but to say this, and this is important. When you're a politician, sometimes you have to cast very difficult votes. And you understand that after you cast that vote, you're going to have all kinds of phone calls coming into your office. That had to do with the Defense of Marriage Act. That was not a popular vote. So the point here is not just to look back 20 years ago, not just to look at consistency. It is to look at which candidate had the guts to cast difficult votes because they were the right votes, even though one knew that they would be unpopular. That is the issue. And we're living in a moment, God knows, where it's a very difficult moment. We all know that. And all I can tell you, whether it was Iraq, whether it's DOMA, whether it's Don't Ask, Don't Tell, those were difficult votes. I was there on the right side of history, and my friend Joe Biden was not.
So,
yes.
Senator Sanders, you're talking a lot about the differences between you and Joe Biden on Social Security. Why do you think the former vice president is consistently doing better with older voters than you are?
Well, I think that has to do with a number of reasons. Older voters in general are more conservative than younger voters. You might want to turn that question around and ask why we are trouncing them big time among young people. And during the general election, the challenge will be, can we mobilize, which campaign is able to mobilize young people? Older people in general vote in fairly decent numbers in this country. Not as high as I would like, but they vote in fairly decent numbers. Young people do not. Which campaign has the capability of mobilizing young people, which may make all of the difference in this general election? So to answer your question, I think it is no great secret. Trump has a lot of support among older people. That's a fact. And older people, for whatever reason, and I can't quite give you the reason, are more conservative, certainly than young people, and I think than middle-aged people as well. Yes.
Senator, there was a swastika flag unfurled at last night's rally. What do you think of that? Does that make you unsafe at your own rallies?
It's not a question of being unsafe. And the police, I want to congratulate, by the way, the police department here in Phoenix. They did an extraordinary job, and I had the opportunity to tell that to some of the officers. They did a great job last night. So it's not a question of whether I feel unsafe. What I will tell you, I didn't see it originally. I mean, I saw a lot of people looking up and booing and all that stuff. And I didn't learn until I left the stage that it was a swastika. And I will simply say this, and I speak not only as a Jewish American, I think I can speak for the families of some 400,000 American troops who died fighting Nazism, fighting fascism, that it is horrific. It is beyond disgusting to see that in the United States of America, there are people who would show the emblem of Hitler and Nazism. And I was shocked to learn about that later. Now, we have had, and I know some of you have been with me, we have had other events with some Trump people. You know, they get over agitated and they try to disrupt the meeting. You know, we deal with that. But this was something different. To have in the United States of America somebody bringing forth the most detestable symbol in modern history, a symbol in which over 400,000 brave Americans died trying to defeat, is unspeakable, unspeakable. Yes, ma'am.
Senator Sanders, you cited Joe Biden's ties to Barack Obama as a reason why you're not more popular with African Americans. Do you believe that that's the only reason?
No, look, there are a lot of reasons why, and I can't tell you the reason why. We're doing, all I can tell you is that, for example, out in California, we ended up with something like 39% of the vote of people of color. That's African American, Latino, Asian. And, I think it is very clear that is one of the reasons. I'm not saying that that is the only reason. But I would love, and during the course of this campaign, we will take a look at our records in terms of civil rights. I am very proud. It's a funny resume to be offering, but when I was a young man of 21, I was arrested for protesting housing segregation in the city of Chicago when I was a student there. And I've been actively involved in fighting to end all forms of racism in this country since. But I can't give you a definitive answer. I think this ties to Obama is certainly one of the reasons. So there may be other reasons as well. Yeah.
Senator, one quick follow-up on Derek's question. Have you talked with DHS about when and if you're getting Secret Service protection? And then
I'm not sure. I think there has been some contact. I believe there has been.
And
yeah, it's a request. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Just a quick second follow-up. You said on Wednesday after Super Tuesday you were still looking at the numbers of everything, all the data that was coming in from the states. Have you gotten a chance to sort of understand why you may not have performed better versus Joe Biden? I mean, there was a Washington Post model that said 60% of voters who did not cast ballots in 2016 but did vote that night voted for Biden, not you.
I honestly have not. I mean, I like doing those things, so I've been kind of frantic running around, you've been following me. One point that I want to make, and again, it's not, I hesitate to say these things because I like to get my facts 100% right. There has been some discussion about the youth vote. Now, what has happened in a number of the states, the overall vote went up very significantly. That does not mean to say that the number of young people who voted was not higher than it was in 2016. As a percentage of the total, it did not keep up. But it does not mean, because I don't want people to think, there were fewer young people voting in 2020 than in 2016. I don't believe that was the case. The percentage was not as high as the general population. But once again, let me repeat this. Historically, young people do not vote in very high numbers. Historically, lower income people do not vote in very high numbers. And I believe that if we are going to defeat Trump, it is terribly important that we grow those numbers with young people, with lower income people. And I do believe that in the general election, when it comes down to the Democratic candidate versus Donald Trump, it will be easier to mobilize those parts of our population than it has been during the primary process. Yes.
So you're talking about expanding the electorate and the primary, and so far Joe Biden has actually, on Tuesday, he expanded the electorate with suburban voters.
Yeah.
I mean, are you running out of time to expand the electorate to be the nominee?
Well, we're doing the best that we can. We're getting to Michigan, follow me around. We're doing, all I can say is we're working as hard as we can. And I would simply repeat, what I said the other day. This is a unique campaign in the modern history of this country. We are taking on the entire corporate establishment. Some of you may have noticed that the other day, actually, it's quite unbelievable. The stocks for the healthcare industry went soaring after Super Tuesday. Well, I got some bad news for those guys. I know that don't count your chickens until they're hatched. But the healthcare industry was very excited because Joe did well on Super Tuesday. What does that mean? It means they understand that there will not be significant reforms to a dysfunctional and cruel healthcare system. Wall Street executives are opening up their checkbooks to Joe Biden. And again, without going through all of this, I have my doubts as to how significantly we can rally the base, rally the American people when Joe is a candidate who has received funding from over 60 billionaires, has a super PAC, is now, I guess, receiving support from Mike Bloomberg. Do you really think that that is the kind of reality that is going to energize the American people who understand we have to take on the corporate elite to make the changes that we need?
But Senator, to that point, and I understand you have a primary to win here, To that point, though, aren't you worried with emotions running so high in this primary that if you're attacking Joe Biden, that you might actually deteriorate his support among progressives, which
No,
you theoretically
look,
need?
I heard that back in 2016. So what do we do? 2016, the feeling was we should anoint the candidate and get everybody else get outraged. Is that really what democracy is about? So let me be clear and say it for the 14th time, okay? Joe Biden is a friend of mine. I've known Joe for many, many years. I have said from day one, when I announced that I will support the Democratic nominee and I will support Joe Biden if he wins. Joe Biden has indicated he will support the Democratic nominee and support Bernie Sanders. But the American people and democracy are entitled to a serious debate on the issues. The American people are sitting out there and saying, which candidate is best able to beat Trump? All Democrats want to beat Trump. Most independents, some Republicans want to beat Trump. Who is the best candidate? And I think having an honest debate without getting personal or ugly, and I'm not doing that, and if I ever say a fact that is not true, I want to be corrected on that. We're trying to do our best. Sometimes we may make mistakes. We're trying to do our best. And I think Biden is trying to do his best. But at the end of the day, here is the point that I want to make also, because I've heard this a million times. I believe that at the end of the day, 98, 99% of Democrats, people who have voted in this primary, people who have voted for Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, anybody, that all of those people are going to come together around the Democratic candidate. Okay? And they will say, yeah, we have differences with Bernie, we have differences with Joe, whatever it may be. But they understand that those differences are minimal compared to the differences with Trump. The challenge is not that. That's going to happen. The challenge is how do you energize the American people and say to people, well, I didn't vote last time, I didn't vote 2 years ago, I'm not going to vote. I don't really care. They all stink. It's terrible. How do you get those people into the political? How do you get young people? And on that one, I honestly believe that we are the campaign to do it. All right, we got a plane to catch. All right, thank you very much. Okay, see you guys.
Spoken to Joe Biden since you